Thank you very much for joining us for this fireside chat. We get a little fire here, but you guys can't see it. But I'm super excited about this fireside chat. And one of the reasons is because I've known Phil for 20 years. And I've seen the founder evolve from a startup to running now of an extremely successful public company. And Phil, for me, is a full stack CEO. And what I mean by a full stack CEO is, he went from startup to running a public company. But I remember one day we were walking out of a meeting and I saw Phil stop by a computer, one of the programmers, and he wanted to show him something that he wanted fixed, and just goes in and starts coding. So full stack CEO, beginning to end, and also a good friend of mine. So there's tons of learnings here, and I want us to dig in to you, your past, and also the future and how you see FinTech. So we'll start with my first question, and in your words, go. Maybe just tell us a little bit about NUVEI and a little bit about also the scale, which Jacques was referring to, because you guys are not a small player.
We're not. First of all, I don't remember that story about me coding, but if I did code, it'd be dangerously bad. I just want to put that out there for everyone. But thank you, Dave. It's true, Dave. I think we worked together in 2003 and 2004, right? Mm-hmm. Time flies. You blink, 20 years have gone by. So what is NUVEI? NUVEI, for all of you that transact online, whenever you hit buy, if it's you or your significant other like it is in my house, seems like Amazon is at my door every day, multiple times per day. Every time you hit buy, NUVEI's in the background. We run that transaction, we drive the reconciliation, and we operate today in roughly 200 markets around the world to help our customers connect with their customers. What's fascinating about payments, and when you guys think about your ecosystem, about FinTech, is that there are no borders in FinTech. What you do here is applicable and relevant almost identically, but different in every part of the world. So how we pay, how we expect to get paid, from currencies to modalities to credit to debit to an open account, it's incredibly different all around the world. And that is a complication and the complexity that NUVEI comes back to our customers through a single integration. We allow them to create a local marketplace, connect with customers in all corners of the world to allow customers to pay and be paid in their preference and provide all the back office tools so they can normalize their business. So today we're about 2,200 folks from around the world. We have 17 offices around the world. We're processing right around $50 billion for our customers on a quarterly basis. And one of the big things for us, and ultimately for your journey, if we have entrepreneurs in the room, is that we really focus on profitable growth. And for many of us, we've seen, right, during the heyday of FinTech, when everyone was raising capital with PowerPoint presentations as their coding platform, those days come to roost, right? It's not growth at all costs. For us, it's always been thoughtful and profitable growth. And so today, last quarter for us, just under $310 million of US dollars of revenue, $110 million of EBITDA, and $96 million of free cash flow that we're reinvesting to the business so that we can continue expanding from country to country.
So 110 million of EBITDA.
US, that's like 400 Canadian.
That's like 400 million Canadian. So, you're obviously not a startup anymore. You're obviously not coding anymore either, but he did code. So take us back to day one. Like, what is the startup journey here? Like, how did this start? How did you come up? Did you say one day, hey, I want to accept credit cards around the world?
No, I had no idea what credit cards were. First of all, how many founders in the room? Like, let me sense the room. So a couple, how many capital markets, investment bankers, funds?
How many don't know what they are?
So I'll talk to the founders, right? The beautiful part as you start your journey is you take that first step because there's an itch. Does that make sense, guys? And that itch is going to define itself and build upon itself into new spheres that you never expect. And that's the beauty of it. I stepped into payments because I had a totally different business that I couldn't get credit card processing for. And I remember Googling saying, how do you accept a credit card? Why is this so complicated? Why do I have to go to a bank? And this was a time before there was duality where you needed one bank for MasterCard, one bank for Visa. I was too young, I had no credit, and there had to be a better way. And that introduced me to payments. And sometimes it's just that speck, right? That speck that starts you on that journey. And that's what brought me into payments. I think the beautiful thing as entrepreneurs, guys, is you take a step, it may be a mistake, you dust yourself off, you learn from it, and you run through the next step. And that's just been a beautiful journey over the last 20 years. We try, we focus really hard on building the right team, and we've had multiple steps throughout the journey, which you will as well, right? From startup to hitting that first $1 million of revenue, to hitting that first $10 million of revenue, to that 50. These are all unique phases in the journey that I mean, if I'm looking back, enjoy every moment of it. But how did we get here, Dave? Perseverance. I'm stubborn. Maybe a tad too aggressive if you ask my wife from time to time. But ultimately, guys, it's perseverance. And what's different for me in my journey is failure was not an option. I never raised external capital, and it was never an option to fail, right? I was always a fighter, and if that door closed, there was a window that cracked, and I went through the window, and I kept on pushing forward. And it allowed me to build the business, from 2003 up until 16, where we came to this really interesting crossroad. And I wish it for all the entrepreneurs in this room as well, is that crossroad came to a U.S. strategic at our doorstep to buy the business, or to partner with NOVACAP and CDPQ. And you guys know kind of the story of thereafter, but it was one thing that I learned, and I wish I did it earlier, is to align yourself with great partners that are financially, intellectually, and emotionally connected to your story is so important. And what we did together with CDPQ and NOVACAP transformed the company. Ultimately, we are doing now more a month in EBITDA and cash flow than we did in 2017 all year round. And it just shows you like aligning the right people, and that's the same from team to how you manage your culture to how you invest in the business and how you have continuity. And even where we sit today, and forgetting about the backdrop of the capital markets, we feel like we're on the ground floor. There's a lot more to do. There's so much more that I find incredibly exciting in fintech. For those of you that are entrepreneurs and investors in fintech, it's just beginning, right? It's just getting hot. And I think our stage together is make Montreal, plant that flagpole, that Montreal becomes that epicenter, like London, Austin, San Francisco, and the others. We have everything here to make Montreal the next fintech hub. But I digress, Dave. Back to you.
You answered all my questions, so we're going to go to the audience now for more questions. I want to double click and take a quick step back on something, because you started talking about the challenges and the lessons learned, and there's more founders in here than the hands that raise, because I recognize some of their faces. But I just want us to when you look back, like what were some of the challenges that you think that are worthwhile to share? Like what were some of the the lessons learned along the way?
I think as an entrepreneur, you're often learning by doing. Does that make sense for the entrepreneurs in the room? And if we were to break it up in early stages, before we raised capital from Goldman Sachs Specialty Lending Group in 2005, we were a month away from not having funds for payroll. Does that sound familiar for folks here? So, you think about the sleepless nights, right? The stress that you come back to, you internalize it. And I think the biggest thing that I would normalize for all of us, and I'm sure it's for every one of you in your own respective businesses, is you got to love what you do, right? You got to breathe it and live it. And that comes with some really interesting upsides, and it comes with some really deep and dirty downsides, meaning that you internalize the failures deeply. And I think those are kind of the challenges that you end up coming back to. Lots of sleepless nights, lots of stress, because you love the business, right? And you have so much, so much potential to build it out, and you always need that extra day. And I find from the beginning of raising capital, but we didn't want to give up equity, so we went to a special lending group. That worked out great. As partners, when you first bring them in, it's always great. To get them out is always more difficult, by the way. That's a whole other story. But I think it's a matter of, the first one is building the business. And I think the second one was, 20 years is a long time. The entire fintech ecosystem has changed dramatically from when we started the business. And what that means is that while your product and service is the same, what you're actually offering is different. And hear me out for this in the beginning. Think about 20 years ago how we used to buy, right? We used to go to a store, right? We'd use our debit and credit card, and there was always a terminal around every desk, right? Today, how many of you use Apple Pay? Everybody, right? Like you cannot raise your hand, but it's always there, right? How many of you are buying online? How many of you using Interact Online in different topics? Like Germany is almost 70-80% gyro pay, which is kind of a debit versus credit card. So how we are paying has changed, which means that the business continuously have to reinvent themselves and invest into the platform to becoming relevant. And I think those are the biggest challenges of understanding of what you built yesterday is fantastic, but it's not relevant for tomorrow. How you continue investing thoughtfully, and how you manage the capital that you have as a prize resource were some of the biggest lessons for me around the last 20 years, and I think it's going to be the same going forward.
It's kind of interesting coming from the venture world. You see a lot of companies that burn a lot of money, and something that always amazed me when we were working together is really that customers were your business model, right? It was not investors, it was not funding. You were self-funded. You were bootstrapped for the longest time, and satisfying those customers, and it was like, I remember the sales team, like it's one by one, closing customers, making sure that we continue to make float. So, it's a great a lesson also for founders that, if you don't have a capital efficient business, eventually it's going to come back at you.
Listen, for every founder, be frugal, be gritty, right? Take those dollars and extend them because you never know what's going to happen next. For all of you that have raised capital, then you have enough money in the balance sheet for the next 2 years. God bless you, right? But if you're going back out now, it's going to be a nasty surprise, right? And these are just things from the pendulum has swung from one end to the other. But I still operate the business like I did the first day, right? Frugal, being really thoughtful of how we spend our money, and to make sure that we're really efficient. And that is something of big importance to me, to remain nimble, right? Even at 2,200 people and operating in all different time zones and all around the world, and being efficient is something that I would strive to, because revenue dollars look great to make you feel great, but it's cash flow that pays the bills.
Things are not done alone. Talk a little bit about the team, the culture, and what you think makes a great leader, right? We had Dave up here, which I know is an extremely strong CEO. You've got an incredible team. Maybe just talk a bit about how you find those really high caliber team members. How do you build that culture as you start to grow inside of a business? I've seen a lot of businesses that as you grow, the culture starts to fall apart. Especially, the younger stage companies that raise all of a sudden a bunch of money and they go from 20 employees to 200 employees. And all of a sudden, the whole, what hits the fan, and then the culture starts to fall apart and they become inefficient and so on. So, this long-winded intro to say, culture and team are really core to what you guys do.
It's everything. So if you think about how you build out, and remember, right, we're spending a third or half of our time working. Who here loves what they do? Nobody raises their hand? Okay, well, I got a couple. I think the biggest thing is, how do you create an environment where people can have really interesting work, right? Work with people that they love and have an opportunity to create wealth. Those are the three big things that you can leave off to build a successful culture. And people are everything. And what you end up coming back to as an employer is, I've sat there and enjoyed weddings. I've sat there with our employees and enjoyed them welcoming children. I've sat there and welcomed, some graduations. I've also been there for funerals. I've been there when one of our employees buried one of their sons. And ultimately, it's a matter of understanding that we're all deeply connected. In fact, Dave, I think you went through something when we were together, right? If you think about it, is stand behind your people, because life goes full circle, and that's something that we really believe in. And sometimes it's not returned, but ultimately it's just the essence of creating that environment that they know I got your back, right? There's going to be a time where you're going to need it. I got your back. Make the work fun, make it challenging, make it interesting. And I think the biggest thing for us is to remain transparent. Speak to your folks on an even level, never be too high. And that creates a foundation for people to love and enjoy the business that they're in. And, we're celebrating so many folks that have been in the company for 20 years. And in today's world, it's not normal, right? If you think about technology roles, it's 18 months, right? And that is a huge cost to all of us, because that 18-month developer takes that knowledge next door, and we need to retrain someone new for higher costs. In other words, you're better off engaging with and creating that platform for them to grow with you as the org grows. From a leadership perspective, I have two big things, and that I could summarize. Is the first one is listen. Right? Listen to your leaders. We all hire great people, but sometimes we get ahead of ourselves, right? Leave the ego at the door and thoroughly listen and engage with your leaders. That's the first advice that I would leave to. And the second one is empower, right? Allow your leaders to execute, and you'll find amazing folks that should be better than you in everything that they do, right? As you round up the table. And that brings a really solid team with the best and brightest in all their core competencies. Would you agree, Mr. Schwartz? There we go.
Yeah, I remember back when we were working together, I see Phil was, crossing that path from entrepreneur to CEO. The company was getting bigger, the revenue was getting bigger. And I remember I went out to the whole, mainly the leadership team, but by then we had quite a few kind of managers, directors, VPs, and so on. And I surveyed them. And I asked them, I said, what feedback do you have for Phil to, as he goes from entrepreneur to CEO? What are his strengths? What are his weaknesses? What would you change? I kind of put myself on the edge because I'm like, Phil's going to fire me.
Totally. If I knew about it, I would have.
No, but I remember giving you might not remember this, but I remember giving you the kind of that report, and you gave me a hug, and you said like this is a really nice one. It's either he was going to punch me in the face or give me a hug. And so I was kind of happy that you gave me a hug because you're a bit bigger than me. But so I digress. Just kind of like you.
No, but the whole point is, we're all learning, right? In each of our roles, right? We're all growing and learning. It doesn't matter if you're, well-to-do or not well-to-do. You have to accept that there's opportunities for us to get better on and challenge yourself. And I think that's the beauty of life.
I want to switch gears to the whole acquisition side. And, there's a lot of talk, sort of in the tech ecosystem that some founders in Canada just sell too early. They don't build, right? And I get it. Sometimes there's an acquisition, they've got money on the table, and they want to exit. But there's also, this notion of building something bigger and continuing. And instead of being hunted, you guys became a hunter and went and did some very successful acquisitions. Like, I was blown away by it. You just did a $1.3 billion US acquisition of Fayer. You did another acquisition before that of Card. Was the other? You did another $1 billion acquisition before that. SafeCharge. Tell us about sort of that decision to say, listen, we're going to become, and I think that was also one of the reasons you've been working with. We were talking in the back and with Jacques and with CDPQ and NovaCap, fueling acquisitions. And I think that's also a great lesson, because eventually you get to this point where you say, am I going to sell, or actually am I going to own this market? And so you went and did a bunch of acquisitions.
Listen, I've never set up for world domination day, so I never said I'm going to own the market. But we're
no,
working
Jacques did before you.
I know, but we're working a $100 trillion market for us, right? There's room for lots of players to be highly successful. I think there's two factors here to consider, right? The first one is, the Canadian landscape has changed a lot. For us, we're thinking about 20, 30 years ago, companies grew, they sold themselves to an American player, and off they went. If you guys remember that. Then funds like yourselves, Dave, are you taking notes there or what?
No,
funds like yourself have started, like we have yourself, Inovia, right, NovaCap and others that have been investing in our Canadian tech sector that has grown. So now we have another option where we have local capital, which is interesting. And I think optionality for all of you entrepreneurs has now shown that, yes, you can go the traditional way of selling to an American, which is totally fine. I'm using American, but selling to a foreign that wants to enter Canada. You have the option of raising capital locally at terms now that are equal or better to what you would find south of the border. And then you have the option of tapping the capital markets, which NUVEI'S done as well. So I think optionality for liquidity for entrepreneurs has never been better. And I think this is a great place to be today. When it comes back to us hunt versus hunted, for our perspective, because we're cash generative, we want to reinvest in the business. And our thesis on M&A is to be bold, right? Don't go buy peddly little crappy businesses. Buy things that are better, that change you, that challenge you, that expand your market and expand your reach. And that's what we did. In 2019, we bought a company called SafeCharge. If you guys are interested, I'll tell you a little story since Jacques is here. Is Jacques still here? There he is. I'll tell you a little story about SafeCharge in a minute. And recently we bought Fayer. And see value, right? Have great advisors and a great team around it, but see value and be bold to think of where your company can be in the next 3 to 5 years with what you're acquiring and execute on that. And that's what we do. The fun thing for us is, yes, we bought Fayer for, slightly over $1.3 billion US. We levered up to just over 3 times. Just because of our cash flow generation, we're delivering fast, right? By the time next year, we'll be sub 2 times, which means that we're back in the M&A game sometime early 2024, which is fascinating, right? So you're able to absorb these great businesses, expand your TAM, drive new use cases for your technology, and walk your way into new end markets. So for example, for Fayer, we've entered B2B, which is fascinating for us for our use cases. We've entered government, and we've entered integrated payments as software starts encroaching on payments for us to power them. So really like what we're doing around those 3 capabilities. But with respect to M&A in itself, I'll give you guys a quick story about SafeCharge, is look beyond the borders of what you see, right? Don't just judge the book by the cover. Dig in and find how relevant it is for you. SafeCharge was a business that was overlooked by many of our peers, and the more we did diligence on it, the more we liked it. So SafeCharge was focused very much as a European listed on the AIM company that focused on EU gaming, right? Regulated gaming in Europe, which is something of a market now that's opening up here in North America. And what we found there is we found this technology that was incredible, focused on customers that had 100% requirements, no latency. They're spending tens of millions of dollars a week in advertisement, and they need conversions. And the more we dug, we said, wow, this is so good for gaming. Imagine what it can do in retail and travel and marketplaces and other. And no one went there. So my first call, obviously, was to my great business partner and said, I found an amazing deal. NovaCap was, tell me more. I'm like, it's a publicly listed company, and we're going to have to go through the Rule of 6 and UK takeover rules, which is a nightmare. All right, tell me more. It's in gaming. Okay, tell me more. The owner has a colorful past, but it's really good for us. I had the same conversation with Jacques. By the time I got to the second bullet, Jacques was on the floor having an aneurysm. But the whole point is, together, we look past that and said, what could that mean for Nuvei? And that's a great thing about having special partners, is that you're able to find and be bold, to do M&A, to transform the company and the trajectory of the business. A big part of our success today is the Safe Charge acquisition, which is a technology that still powers us all around the world. I think what's also fascinating, guys, just a story in terms of partners, is when we bought Safe Charge, I had to turn my pockets inside out to let every last penny fall on the table. And I was short, was it 200 million? 100, but who's counting? I was short a measly $180 million. And this is usually where things get ugly, right? Because that's where your financial partners leverage you and cost you a pound of flesh. And instead of arguing about what my value was and what the value of SafeCharge was, NovaCap and CDPQ said, don't worry, I'm going to bridge you. I'm going to put a preferred in and you repay me later. And that, guys, is why, the partners that you pick and the partners that you are to those entrepreneurs is so important, because it's created a lifetime bond that, for me, I'll always go out of my way for NovaCap and CDPQ in anything that I could possibly do. I'm deeply indebted for them to, one, have backed me for that transformative acquisition, but more importantly, for not, the right term is bending you over the table, which a lot of my American friends would have absolutely done. So I'm incredibly grateful of looking past it, being bold, and creating a structure that ultimately puts us in the position where we are today.
My next question was, would you do business with CDPQ and NovaCap again? Forget about that question. I guess that's done. But so you decided you're bootstrap, doing extremely well.
Yeah.
And so then you decide you're going to take on some money, you're going to do a bunch of acquisitions. Some didn't make them all that happy, but now they're super happy because it went from what it was doing to what it can do. And so I got to ask you this, how is running a public company? You go from entrepreneur and, you're kind of that decision maker, and then all of a sudden you've got more people around the table. And I see this with young founders too. It's it's a partnership. And you got a partnership with a lot of shareholders. How is that?
I mean, if we're just amongst us, right?
Yeah, don't tweet it.
Aside,
no Twitter. No.
I think the biggest fallacy that I hear out there is I hear public as an exit, right? You've seen a lot of entrepreneurs saying, we're going to take the business public, but the reality is public is a new beginning, if that makes sense, guys. And, it's not an exit at all. It's a new vector in the journey of the company. From NUVEI'S perspective, we took the business public as a financing initiative, right? We raised $836 million on the Canadian IPO and $400 million on the US IPO, and allowed us to delever totally and allowed us to come back into a position of doing future M&A. The backdrop today for capital markets, for fintech in particular, is extremely difficult, right? So, and unfortunately, the public market is a very emotional one, Dave. So if you ask me today, how's it running a public company, I'll tell you it sucks. If you ask me 2 years ago, I'd tell you it's great. But ultimately, you have to do what's right for your business. And from a Nuvei perspective, we have so much to offer. I think it's allowed us to, one, have visibility to our customers so they can look at our financial and our financial performance, which is really important. It allows my employees to have real ownership, and I think that's also important. And ultimately, yes, it's not the most fun to run public companies in this backdrop, but you got to keep that noise out, heads down, and focus on execution, because the markets are finicky, right? You're a zero today, you're a hero tomorrow, you go back and forth, the pendulum swings its way back and forth, but value is built over time. It's certainly not, a sprint, and it's not measured quarter to quarter.
So switching gears a little bit, you guys are a big fintech, and Montreal success story. Montreal started. How do you find the fintech ecosystem here versus other geographies?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think Canada has an opportunity to plant a flagpole, right? And I think we should have done it during the craze of digital assets and other, to bring folks into Canada, to bring talent into Canada. But we have everything here, from a leadership, from a global feel, and ultimately from a regulatory infrastructure to be really relevant in the fintech ecosystem. And there's been some startups that play with it. The only thing that I would keep in mind is that Canada is the size of California, right? And that's where sometimes I have to do all this effort, including French and all the other things, to operate in Canada, whereas in the US, I don't need any of this, right? And so we have to create a regulatory framework that makes sense for people to be in Canada. Our history is we started in Canada, when the dollar was like at $1.60. So it was beautiful, right? You paid all your operating expenses with the FX alone. But we always serviced the US. We only came into Canada, I think in 07 or 08. I think the beauty here for every fintech entrepreneur is viewed as a world stage. Keep home, keep places that you really love, make sure that you're relevant to your team. Montreal has everything to offer from an infrastructure perspective, from a talent, from R&D credits, to be relevant going forward. I think London has become a great hub. We'll see the impacts of Brexit over time. Amsterdam, Paris, and Berlin have as well. Austin has been bubbling as a tech hub. Why not Montreal is going to be all about our policies. The only dilemma that I come back and see is that Quebec is still a place where people avoid when you have things like Bill 96 or other, which give people pause, right? You want to invest in the long term. And I think this is just something that we have to understand together, is that if we want to be a leader, we got to attract international, we got to attract internal, and we got to attract investments for people to say we have a stable platform to execute going forward.
Well, guys like Shopify are moving back to Montreal. So
there's only one guy.
There's one. Okay, there's one. But Montreal is a great place to start a company. And I think what's always set you guys apart, and anyways in my mind, is that you're always thinking, thinking global. Like from the get-go, your customers were in the U.S. They weren't even in Canada. You launched, and it was really about revenue in the U.S. And then you kind of backed into Canada.
Yeah, through an acquisition, we did. Yeah.
Yeah, but also I know that you've been in, you've done business with how many countries? How many countries are you guys
today?
Right now?
We have offices in 17 countries. We're
17.
serving 48 countries, and we connect into 200 markets.
From our ecosystem, what do we've got Shopify, we got Lightspeed, we got Wealthsimple. We have a couple great success stories, but we want more. I want more.
You got to invest more.
I got to invest more. But we want more NUVEI'S. And I know it's a kind of a general question, but what, are we missing anything? How can we get more of these, right? I see my friend Jerome from BDC, CDPQ. We want to fund these, acquirers. We want to fund these businesses that become our next champions of tomorrow.
Look, the beautiful part for us is just creating means of capital for entrepreneurs to execute, if that makes sense, Dave. Because it all starts with the entrepreneurs. You can have the BDCs and the Luge capitals and the other. If you got nothing to invest into, nothing is going to happen. We got to create a framework where folks are from here or move here to actually create their businesses. If you look at London, right? I know tons of people that have come from India, from Singapore, and other that have established a flagpole in London and built their way out. Why not Montreal? And I think it's political stability, investing in our youth, creating an entrepreneurial path where they can raise capital, and making sure that Montreal is known as a fintech hub that supports it. Look, selfishly, guys, I'm in Canada, and specifically Montreal and Quebec, because this is the nicest place in the world to live. I deal with all kinds of other shenanigans, but this is the place that I love my kids to grow up with. This is the place where, you can walk around at night without any, we are so fortunate where we live compared to so many other places around the world. We should embrace that, and we should make this successful by investing wisely in that next generation, in the generation of entrepreneurs, to create success stories.
Je suis 100% d'accord. 100% d'accord. So, if you look back, and you said you had the younger founders in the audience, the younger Phil, what would you say to the younger Phil? If you look back, and what guidance would you give to some of these founders? We touched upon it a little bit before. Think about, don't grow at all costs. But if you look back, you say to Phil, because I was checking before, and Orly, your wife, did tell me that you are very impatient. But what would you give the feedback to the entrepreneurs around you?
Listen, I think the biggest thing for me, and I still operate the business this way, is keep it simple, right? KISS. I've heard people explain to me business models where I was cross-eyed and backwards and forwards by the time I was done. And if I can't understand it, I'm not the dumbest guy in the world, and I've been in fintech for a long time. If I can't understand it, then I don't even know how you understand it and how other people are going to absorb it. So the biggest thing for entrepreneurs is keep it simple. Make sure your value proposition is sound, keep it simple, and invest into that. Don't create building blocks that go back and forth. It just becomes too messy. In my end, and it's hard because you talked about one of my greatest attributes is I'm impatient and I'm aggressive, and that has great things at certain parts and is obviously negative in others. All our values and virtues and things that come after it help us in certain parts and others. But take its time, right? Things have a way of working themselves out if you invest and be patient for it. That's what I'd tell myself for those years. I wanted everything in day one. And now I realize that things are building blocks, right? You can't jump from A to B. Sorry, you can't jump from A to C without going through B, and sometimes B is painful.
Yeah, you once told me, you said, I'm only impatient to those that waste my time. Don't waste my time. What do you want?
I don't remember that, Dave.
No, you don't remember any of that. So getting to the kind of the final questions, but what's next for Nuvei, and what do you think is on the horizon of innovation in your space?
I think from Nuvei's perspective, our big thing was to bring new use cases to our technology stack. So if you guys think about it, from gaming to social games to marketplaces to retail to travel to subscription, and we've talked about this openly about our omni-channel solution to drive devices to create unified commerce platforms for our customers, new end markets and integrated payments that we acquire with Fayer and B2B, and that includes factoring on the AR side as well as on the AP side. We're really bullish on our government business and very much on the software business. So, Nuvei's scratching the surface in a $100 trillion TAM that we're still a small player, if you think about it, in this big market. So for us, it's going to be thoughtful execution, while continuously managing to our discipline of free cash flow and operating margin and driving forward M&A opportunities and expanding scale in our card issuing, our pay in, our payout, and our reconciliation products. So I like where we're sitting, and I think the reality is this dislocation in the market doesn't come often, right? And companies like Nuvei will take advantage of it. Certainly it sucks if you're raising money or if you're looking at your stock price every day. But, if you think more long-term, this dislocation is an opportunity for companies like Nuvei.
How many business customers do you guys have? Can you say?
In the hundreds of thousands, but we don't disclose that.
Okay, but you're able to land and expand with existing customers, right? You're able to better serve them with other solutions. You were talking about accounts payable, accounts receivable. The question arises, we've got FinTechs. There's a whole bunch of early stage companies which are building on modern technology. They're young, they're nimble, they've got all kinds of different solutions, and hopefully they can explain them to you. How do you see partnerships with some of these younger early stage companies? Because it might not be ready yet for an acquisition, but do you see an opportunity to be partnering with them a little bit earlier on?
We do. I mean, the challenge that we have with partnerships, so going back a step, we build, buy, or partner often, right? So that's how we put our roster, and it's very much the same for many global players. The challenge with the partner is that we're bringing tier one multinational companies to their doorstep. So it can't be like a minimum viable product that we're going out with. So the hurdle to partner with the Nuvei is high, Dave, but we do it all the time. Mm-hmm. So it's just a matter of making sure that they can scale with us and deliver for us. I mean, we know what growing pains are, and sometimes we can 10 times the business with the volume that we have from small partners, and we end up dealing with the backlash of that. So while we are open for partnerships, it's a hurdle.
What do you do outside the office to relax? To unwind? You're somebody that's go. I mean, called you yesterday. I think you're in Asia or something. And
I was not, no.
Yeah, but
yesterday was a holiday for me. So
okay.
But guys, you got to love what you do, right? So I have three beating hearts. I have my own, I have that of my family, and I have that of Nuvei. And unfortunately, they're not necessarily all separate, if that makes sense. So I'm not a guy that's really good at putting work aside. And one of the things that I try very much is to spend that Friday, Saturday, Sunday uninterrupted with the kids, mixed with Nuvei emails. But I try really hard to be present and to be active with them. And my work has unfortunately a lot of travel. We are global, mm-hmm. and sometimes I'm in each part of the world in 1 month. But the biggest thing is health. I train a lot. Wellness. I watch what I eat. I love to train. I love my family time, but I really do love what I do. So it's incredibly fulfilling. So it's that balance that I think is imperfect in my life right now, but something that I don't want to miss a moment on anything.
Final question: Do you prefer a credit card or cash?
Totally, credit card. Oh. Everyone only pay by credit card.
All right, so we got a couple minutes left. Opening it up for questions. Yep.
Hi, good afternoon. That was awesome. I really took a lot from that. So I'm a founder, and we're planning on doing what you did. We're going directly to the US. And what we were told was that Americans love Canadians who start doing business in the US because they get fleeced. So in your opinion, what are some safeguards or things we can do now to make sure that our operations in the States go as smoothly as possible?
Well, listen, I mean, if you're getting fleeced, that's a leadership conversation, right? Make sure that you have the right folks around the table. Certainly, if you're negotiating something that you're blind to, you're going to get fleeced, right? That's just the nature of the beast. I would urge you to hire consultants or find people that know what they're doing to help guide you on that. But that's not just a limitation of Canadians going to the US. It's predominantly know what you're negotiating, right? If someone's charging 1,000% premium and you save 50%, it's lovely, but it's still too much. So surround yourself with the right folks to help you on that. I never found going from country to country was fleecing because, and we do this all the time, right? We try to expand between 5 and 10 new countries a year, is make sure you do the work. What is, in my case, what is interchange? What are the bank costs, right? Make sure that you have a team that just really focuses on that because that will haunt you later on, right? You're going to be stuck in contracts. They're going to be making all the margin and you're stuck. So take the time to get it right out of the gate.
I think we had a question at the back of the room.
David, did you forget my name?
Layal, I didn't even see it was you. But
That's
hey,
all right.
Layal from FinTech Cadence.
Thank you very much. I really appreciated the conversation, a lot of the insight. Very quickly, we're a nonprofit organization based in Montreal, operating across Canada, and we're focusing on developing the FinTech ecosystem. So I really appreciated what you were saying about ecosystem development, and selfishly would love to hear what would you give as advice for organizations like us who are really focusing on the very early stages in developing the ecosystem and doing it with corporate partners, with incubation services, as well as engaging academia in the process too.
You know, what I found is, unfortunately, your platform has got to be one of honest engagement with the end market, right? Because when you have a lot of the funds that sit around with it, all they want to do is get in early. And so you have to have like a total trust environment to help entrepreneurs build out their business cases and to make sure that there's a viable platform for them to continue going forward. I think the issue that you end up coming back to is that FinTech today is sexy, right? So FinTech means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And ultimately, it's a matter of making sure that our young leaders, because it really is that, right? Getting our young leaders to understand that there is an opportunity that they could create a business and they can build it out with the support of your organization, others, when they are ready, to help them take that step. Because the biggest thing for a founder is what? Is taking the step, right? Are you leaving a job? Are you getting out of school? Like that big step is where they need the most help, and then guide them with, solutions, advice, to help them take those next steps forward. From our perspective, NUVEI'S been more passive in the Canadian fintech market. We intend on taking a greater role. We love to see Canada thrive. And what that means, I'm not quite sure yet. We definitely have experience in other markets where fintech, from a regulatory framework, from a regulator access, from legal, like just things that are designed and clear for what entrepreneurs need to move forward with respect to licensing in particular, but also global operations.
They told us we had to finish on time.
No, it's okay. We have one more question right there.
All right, go ahead.
Great. Actually, I want to go back in that room of negotiations because you had a great story about that acquisition, and you're a frugal guy, and I don't assume you're an easy negotiator. But you called it 200. I think he said 108, and then you went 180. So we're talking give or take, $90 million. You still went ahead with that acquisition, and that would have been a great point to negotiate on your favor, saying, hey, we just don't have the cash. Let's do it. There was nobody chasing that deal. Can you walk us through that room and how you played that without disclosing anything, obviously? That's
in 1 minute or less. It was actually 180 million of equity that the company took up together. So that was missing to buy SafeCharge. The good news is, and I'm going back from memory, but there was never the feeling that I was getting taken advantage of. And that's like a testament to the partners that I had. They were always transparent. They're saying, you know what, we're not going to make this an issue. It's going to be a preferred. It'll sit on the balance sheet. It'll pick so the company doesn't have to take care of that, and we'll deal with that later on. And it was a very easy negotiation. I think that's like one of my greatest, memories of working with these two partners is that there was never any bullshit. Oh, you know what? I don't love those types of deals, right? If you find Americans, they come in, they give you a sticker price, and they find all these reasons to pay you less. I don't engage with that, right? It's either like we come in, we're really thoughtful of how we do the deal, and that's the deal that we do. but we never come in to kind of squeeze you down. It creates a bad environment for the leadership team. It typically screws you later on because they're all leaving the business. And I think that's a penny wise for pound foolish. Every deal for me, and I don't need a 50-page contract, right? My word is my bond. When I shake hands, that's what I stepped in to do. That's what I'd like to deliver, and that's what we want to execute upon. And I think, Jacques, we've talked about this often through our time, is that we want to be men of our word, right? Remember, M&A is all about reputation. When Nuvei comes to the door, I want people to realize that they're here to play, right? They're not here to dance. They're here to execute, and that's really important for us.
During any negotiation, that's when you see somebody's true character, and that's when you decide whether or not you should be working together. And some of the best deals are the deals you actually walk away from. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate
Really
it.
appreciate
Phil,
it.
thank you very much.
Thanks, Sophie.
Thank you.